Imagine if your DNA could tell a story, one that stretches back thousands of years, revealing the footsteps of ancient civilizations, lost empires, and forgotten migrations. Persian DNA isn't just unique, it's a genetic time capsule, holding secrets that connect modern Iranians to some of the most powerful and influential cultures in human history. But what exactly makes it so distinct? The answer lies in a mixture of geography, migration, and resilience, shaping a genetic identity unlike any other in the world. Iran has always been at the center of human movement. Positioned between Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East, the region became a natural meeting point for different populations. Unlike isolated civilizations, Persians inherited a genetic mosaic, an intricate blend of ancient Neolithic farmers, Indo-European migrants, and later influences from Arab, Turkic, and Mongol expansions. But despite these layers of history, Persian DNA has remained remarkably stable, preserving genetic markers that have persisted for thousands of years. What's even more fascinating is how Persian genetics don't neatly fit into the expected categories. Unlike their Arab neighbors, Persians carry a strong Indo-European lineage, linking them to ancient steppe warriors and early civilizations that shaped Eurasia. Yet, unlike Europeans, their genes also contain traces of Mesopotamian, South Asian, and even Caucasus populations, creating a genetic profile that is both diverse and deeply rooted in history. It's a contradiction that makes Persian DNA so special, simultaneously ancient and adaptive, distinct yet connected. The resilience of Persian DNA is a story of survival. Empires have risen and fallen, from the Achaemenids to the Sassanids, but the genetic foundation of Persians has endured. Even as conquerors came and went, the core genetic structure remained intact, proving that while cultures can be influenced, the deeper identity of a people is often written in their DNA. But this uniqueness isn't just about history. It also has implications for the future. Genetic research is now revealing how Persian DNA plays a role in health, longevity, and even disease resistance, opening doors to personalized medicine that could benefit generations to come. Persian DNA is more than just a collection of genes. It's a living narrative, a testament to the journeys, struggles, and triumphs of an ancient people. It holds the echoes of forgotten migrations, the whispers of lost civilizations, and the blueprint of an identity that has stood the test of time. The real question is, if your DNA could tell its story, what would it say? Persian DNA carries the imprints of some of the most defining migrations in human history. But how did these ancient movements shape the genetic identity of modern Persians? To answer that, we need to go back, way back, to the earliest waves of human migration that crossed the Iranian plateau. This land, rich in history, was not just a passage but a melting pot where different civilizations left their genetic signatures, some still visible in Persian DNA today. The story begins with the first Neolithic farmers who settled in the Zagros Mountains over 10,000 years ago. These early settlers were among the pioneers of agriculture, and their DNA laid the foundation of the genetic structure still present in modern Iranians. But the real transformation came later, around 5,000 years ago, when a major migration reshaped the region, Indo-European tribes from the Eurasian steppe. These groups didn't just bring their language and culture. They mixed with the local population, introducing genetic markers that still distinguish Persians from their Middle Eastern neighbors. Unlike other parts of the world where migrations replaced local populations, the genetic impact in Iran was more of an addition than a replacement. The Persians absorbed, rather than erased, the genetic influence of those who arrived. This explains why, despite later migrations from Arabs, Mongols, and Turks, the core genetic structure of Persians has remained strikingly stable for thousands of years. Even today, genetic studies show that modern Iranians share more similarities with their ancient ancestors than with some of their more recent historical conquerors. What makes Persian DNA so intriguing is its ability to preserve history while adapting to change. The migrations of the past didn't erase the genetic legacy of the original inhabitants but instead led new influences over an already rich foundation. This unique blend of continuity and diversity is why Persian DNA stands out. It is a living record of thousands of years of history, resilience, and adaptation. The question is, if genetics can trace these ancient movements, what else can it reveal about the secrets of Persian ancestry? Persian DNA is more than just a collection of genetic markers. It's a time capsule of ancient civilizations, preserved within the people of Iran. But what does it truly reveal about their origins? To understand this, we have to explore the deep roots of Persian ancestry and the historical forces that shaped it. Genetic studies have confirmed that Persians are one of the most direct descendants of the earliest human populations that settled outside of Africa. Archaeological evidence from the Iranian plateau suggests that the region has been continuously inhabited for over 40,000 years. This means that Persian DNA carries some of the oldest genetic lineages in the world, connecting modern Iranians to the very first pioneers of civilization. One of the most defining moments in Persian genetic history was the migration of Indo-European tribes around 3000 BCE. These groups, often linked to the Yamnaya culture of the Eurasian steppe, introduced not just their language but also new genetic traits that mixed with the local Neolithic population. The result? A genetic signature that remains one of the distinguishing features of Persians to this day. Unlike their Arab or Turkic neighbors, Persians retained a unique blend of Indo-European and indigenous West Asian ancestry, setting them apart in the genetic landscape of the region. But the story doesn't end there. Later historical events, such as the Achaemenid Empire's expansion, created vast trade networks that brought genetic influences from as far as Greece, Egypt, and India. However, despite centuries of conquests and migrations, including the Arab, Mongol, and Turkic invasions, the core genetic structure of Persians remained remarkably resilient. Even today, their DNA still closely resembles that of their ancient ancestors, proving that while cultures may change, genetics often tell a story of continuity. So what does this tell us about Persian ancestry? It reveals a people deeply connected to their past, yet shaped by the movements of history. Persian DNA is not just unique, it's a living testament to thousands of years of civilization, adaptation, and survival. Persian DNA carries within it a silent but powerful legacy, a genetic blueprint that has endured for thousands of years despite wars, invasions, and shifting empires. But what makes it so distinct? The answer lies in a combination of genetic continuity, geographic isolation, and selective mixing with ancient civilizations. One of the key factors behind the uniqueness of Persian DNA is the Iranian plateau itself. This vast and rugged landscape has acted as both a bridge and a barrier throughout history. While it connected Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East, it also created natural enclosures that allowed populations to preserve their genetic identity. Unlike regions where constant waves of migration diluted native genetics, Persia maintained a striking level of genetic continuity. Ancient DNA analysis has shown that Persians share deep-rooted genetic connections with early Neolithic farmers from the Zagros Mountains. These early settlers laid the foundation for one of the world's first civilizations, and their genetic legacy still runs strong in modern Iranians. What's fascinating is that despite various conquests, from the Arab expansion to the Mongol invasions, the Persian genetic structure remained surprisingly intact. Another aspect that sets Persian DNA apart is its unique Y-chromosome haplogroup distribution. Haplogroups like J2, R1a, and G2a, which trace back to early Indo-European and indigenous West Asian populations, are far more common in Persians than in their neighboring Arab and Turkic groups. This suggests that while there was genetic exchange, Persians retained a distinct paternal lineage that dates back to the Bronze Age. On the maternal side, Persian mitochondrial DNA also tells an intriguing story. The high presence of haplogroups U7 and HV points to deep connections with ancient populations from the Indus Valley, Mesopotamia, and even parts of the Caucasus. This female lineage highlights centuries of trade, migration, and cultural exchange, yet still maintains a unique Persian signature. But perhaps the most surprising discovery is that Persian DNA shows minimal genetic impact from more recent migrations. Unlike some regions that experienced extensive mixing in the past 1,000 years, Iran's core genetic structure has remained largely unchanged. This means that a modern Persian individual shares more genetic similarities with their ancestors from 3,000 years ago than most populations do with theirs. Persian DNA is a living relic, a genetic mosaic of ancient civilizations that has survived millennia of historical upheavals. It's proof that while cultures evolve, genetic identity can persist, shaping not only the physical traits but also the deep-rooted heritage of an entire people. Persian DNA is like a time capsule, holding within it the echoes of some of the world's earliest civilizations. But if you think this genetic story is simple, think again. While much of the world saw their genetic makeup shift dramatically due to migrations and conquests, Persia retained a striking level of continuity. Why? The answer lies in its unique position at the crossroads of civilizations. For thousands of years, the Iranian plateau served as both a gateway and a stronghold. It allowed ancient Persians to absorb influences from surrounding regions while still maintaining a distinct genetic identity. Unlike populations that were completely replaced by incoming groups, Persians integrated newcomers into their existing structure rather than being genetically overwhelmed by them. One of the most intriguing aspects of Persian DNA is its connection to Indo-European migrations. Around 4,000 years ago, groups of steppe nomads moved into Iran, bringing with them the early Indo-Iranian languages. But instead of completely reshaping the genetic landscape, they merged with the native Elamite and Zagros populations. This blending gave rise to a gene pool that was neither purely steppe nor entirely indigenous. It was something new, something uniquely Persian. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Despite being conquered by the Greeks, Arabs, Mongols, and Turks, Persian DNA remained largely unchanged. Historical records suggest that invaders, while politically dominant, often formed a small ruling elite rather than replacing the native population. Over generations, these conquerors were absorbed into Persian society rather than the other way around. This is why modern Persians still show a much stronger genetic connection to their ancient ancestors than to more recent invaders. Even on a deeper genetic level, we see patterns that reinforce this story. The Y chromosome markers found in modern Persians, such as J2 and R1A, are the same ones detected in ancient Iranian remains, proving direct paternal continuity. Meanwhile, maternal haplogroups like U7 and HV highlight links to early West Asian civilizations, including Mesopotamians and Indus Valley peoples. This resilience of Persian DNA is rare in human history. While other populations saw their genetic makeup rewritten by external influences, Persians managed to preserve a core identity that stretches back thousands of years. It's a testament to a civilization that, despite all odds, has remained deeply connected to its past. From the rise of the first Persian empires to the present day, one thing has remained constant: the unmistakable uniqueness of Persian DNA. But what truly sets it apart? The answer isn't just in genetics, it's in history, geography, and an unbroken cultural identity that has shaped the Persian genome over thousands of years. One of the biggest factors behind this uniqueness is Persia's strategic location. Positioned between the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, Iran has been a hub of human migration for millennia. Unlike isolated populations that remained genetically stagnant, Persia became a melting pot, but in a controlled way. The Persian genetic code reflects this balance. It absorbed influences without being diluted beyond recognition. Another reason Persian DNA stands out is the concept of cultural dominance over genetic replacement. Unlike many civilizations that were completely reshaped by invaders, Persia had a way of assimilating outsiders into its own culture. The Greeks under Alexander, the Arab caliphates, the Mongols, and even the Turkic rulers all left some genetic traces, but instead of erasing Persian identity, they were absorbed into it. The result? A civilization that continued to exist in its own right, rather than becoming a mere extension of its conquerors. Scientific studies on Persian DNA confirm this remarkable continuity. The high frequency of haplogroups like J2 and R1A connects Persians to some of the oldest agricultural societies in the world while also linking them to Indo-European migrations. Meanwhile, mitochondrial DNA patterns show deep maternal ties to ancient Mesopotamian and South Asian populations, proving that Persian genetics are not only ancient but also exceptionally diverse. What's even more fascinating is how Persian DNA evolved in response to its environment. The vast mountains, deserts, and plateaus of Iran created natural barriers that helped preserve genetic traits over generations. Even when migrations occurred, these geographical boundaries ensured that Persia's core genetic structure remained intact. Ultimately, Persian DNA isn't just unique because of its components, it's unique because of its endurance. It has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, absorbed cultural shifts, and yet remains a direct link to some of the world's earliest civilizations. It's a living record of history, carried in the blood of millions. For thousands of years, Persia has been a bridge between worlds, a meeting point of civilizations, ideas, and, most importantly, genes. But despite countless waves of migration and conquest, Persian DNA has maintained a strikingly distinct identity. The answer lies in a combination of deep-rooted ancestry and a genetic structure that defies simple categorization. One of the most remarkable aspects of Persian genetics is its direct link to some of the oldest civilizations in history. Studies on ancient DNA from archaeological sites across Iran reveal an unbroken genetic lineage dating back to the early Neolithic period. This means that many Persians today carry DNA from the very first agricultural societies that emerged in the Fertile Crescent more than 10,000 years ago. While other regions saw significant genetic turnover due to large-scale invasions, Persia's genetic core remained remarkably stable. But stability doesn't mean isolation. Persia has always been at the crossroads of major migrations, from Indo-Europeans to Arabs, Turks, and Mongols. However, instead of being overwhelmed by these outside influences, Persian DNA adapted and absorbed them in a way that preserved its core identity. This is why genetic studies often show Persians as a unique population, closely related to but distinct from their neighbors in the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia. Another fascinating element is the presence of rare genetic markers that distinguish Persians from surrounding populations. Haplogroups like R1a and J2, commonly found in Persia, link the population to both the Indo-European expansion and the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. At the same time, mitochondrial DNA studies show maternal lineages that connect modern Persians to ancient populations stretching from Anatolia to the Indus Valley. This complex genetic tapestry is what makes Persian DNA stand out. It's not just old, it's an intricate blend of some of the world's most influential civilizations. Even Persia's rugged geography played a crucial role in shaping its genetic uniqueness. The towering Zagros Mountains, the central deserts, and the lush Caspian regions created natural barriers that limited large-scale population mixing. This allowed Persian genetics to remain relatively preserved, even as the world around it changed dramatically. At its core, Persian DNA is a testament to endurance. It's a living record of ancient migrations, cultural resilience, and an unbroken lineage that stretches back to the dawn of civilization. It's not just unique, it's a genetic time capsule, carrying the story of Persia's past into the future. From the grand Achaemenid Empire to the intricate cultural influences of the Sassanid era, Persian history is a story of resilience and adaptation. But what if we told you that this same resilience is deeply embedded in Persian DNA? The genetic legacy of Persia is not just a record of ancient civilizations, it's a biological testament to survival through centuries of change. One of the most intriguing aspects of Persian genetics is its continuity through time. Unlike many ancient populations that were entirely replaced by later migrations, Persians have retained a significant portion of their ancestral genetic structure. Even as the Persian plateau witnessed the rise and fall of empires, genetic studies show that the core Iranian genetic identity remained intact. This stability is remarkable, considering the number of conquests Persia endured, from the Greek invasions of Alexander the Great to the Arab expansion and later the Mongol incursions. But this doesn't mean Persian DNA remained untouched. Instead, it absorbed influences in a way that reinforced, rather than erased, its uniqueness. The genetic makeup of modern Persians includes traces of Indo-European migrations, Middle Eastern admixtures, and even minor contributions from East and Central Asia. However, instead of being diluted, Persian DNA formed a distinct signature, setting it apart from its neighbors. This delicate balance between change and preservation is what makes Persian genetics so extraordinary. Even on a molecular level, the genetic markers found in Persian populations tell a fascinating story. Haplogroup J2, for instance, is strongly associated with the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau, while haplogroup R1a connects Persians to the Indo-Iranian migrations of antiquity. Mitochondrial DNA analyses further reveal maternal lineages that trace back thousands of years, highlighting deep-rooted connections to prehistoric settlements in the region. Another factor that contributed to Persia's unique genetic makeup is its role as a cultural and trade hub. The Persian Empire controlled some of the most important trade routes in history, including the Silk Road, facilitating interaction with various populations. Yet, despite this extensive contact, Persia's genetic core remained relatively stable. This suggests that while cultural exchange was widespread, large-scale genetic assimilation was limited, allowing Persian DNA to retain its distinctiveness while still reflecting a broad historical influence. In essence, Persian DNA is not just a product of history, it's an active participant in it. It has withstood the pressures of invasion, adapted to waves of migration, and yet maintained a unique genetic fingerprint. This balance of preservation and adaptation is what makes Persian DNA truly exceptional. Persia has long been a land of mystery, power, and influence. But beyond its vast empires and poetic heritage, there's something even more fascinating: its deep genetic links to the earliest civilizations. Persian DNA carries echoes of some of the world's first settled communities, connecting modern Iranians to a legacy that predates written history itself. The Iranian plateau was one of the earliest cradles of human civilization, home to some of the first agricultural societies. Genetic studies suggest that many Persians today still carry mitochondrial and Y chromosomal markers dating back to Neolithic farmers who cultivated wheat and barley in these lands over 10,000 years ago. These early communities weren't isolated. They were part of a broader network of human expansion that shaped the genetic foundation of the Middle East and beyond. One of the most surprising discoveries in ancient DNA research is how closely connected Persian genetic history is to early civilizations such as Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Despite the rise and fall of these great societies, Iran remained a genetic bridge between East and West. The movement of traders, conquerors, and settlers introduced genetic diversity, but rather than erasing the native genetic signatures, these influences became woven into the Persian genome, reinforcing its distinctiveness. Even as Persian dynasties expanded their reach, their genetic roots remained strong. The Achaemenid Empire, which ruled vast territories from Greece to India, facilitated an exchange of cultures and ideas. Yet, genetic continuity shows that despite political shifts, the core Persian ancestry remained largely unaltered. This resilience in the face of historical upheaval speaks to a deeply rooted genetic lineage that has endured through millennia. Another key aspect of Persian DNA is its adaptability. Studies show that while many populations experienced major genetic turnovers due to large-scale migrations, the Persian gene pool absorbed new influences without being entirely replaced. This balance between stability and adaptation is a rare phenomenon in human history and highlights why Persian genetics remain so distinct. Perhaps the most remarkable insight from genetic research is how Persia's historical legacy is written not just in its monuments and literature, but in the very DNA of its people. Every modern Persian carries within them the story of early civilizations, migrations, and resilience, proof that while empires may rise and fall, the genetic essence of a people endures. From ancient warriors to modern-day Iranians, Persian DNA carries a legacy shaped by countless migrations, conquests, and cultural exchanges. But what sets it apart from the genetics of neighboring regions? The answer lies in the unique blend of indigenous continuity and selective adaptation. Persia's rugged landscapes, from the towering Zagros Mountains to the vast Dashti-Kavir Desert, have acted as both a gateway and a barrier. While the region has been a crossroads for civilizations, its genetic makeup has remained strikingly stable. Unlike many populations that underwent complete genetic turnovers due to invasions, Persians retained strong genetic links to their ancient ancestors. Even the arrival of Turkic, Arab, and Mongol conquerors left surprisingly little impact on the core genetic structure of Persian populations. One of the most defining aspects of Persian DNA is its deep-rooted connection to the Indo-European migrations. Thousands of years ago, Indo-Iranian-speaking peoples moved into the Iranian plateau, bringing with them linguistic and cultural traditions that still shape Persian identity today. However, genetic studies reveal that rather than fully replacing the pre-existing populations, these newcomers merged with indigenous groups, preserving a hybrid genetic legacy that is distinct from both their Central Asian origins and their Near Eastern neighbors. But genetic uniqueness isn't just about ancestry. It's also about adaptation. Over thousands of years, Persians developed genetic traits suited to their environment. Variants related to high-altitude survival, metabolism, and disease resistance have been identified in Iranian populations, showcasing how DNA is shaped by geography and lifestyle. Even the genetic markers associated with longevity and cardiovascular health show fascinating patterns among different Persian ethnic groups. Another striking feature of Persian DNA is the influence of historical trade routes. Iran sat at the heart of the Silk Road, which connected Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. This continuous flow of merchants, scholars, and explorers introduced genetic diversity without erasing the foundational Persian genome. It's why, even today, Iranian DNA shows subtle traces of distant connections, from Mediterranean traders to East Asian travelers, while still maintaining its core genetic identity. In the end, Persian DNA is like an ancient manuscript, layered with the stories of migrations, empires, and survival. It stands as a testament to the endurance of a people who have shaped and been shaped by history, yet have never lost the essence of who they are. For thousands of years, Persia has been at the crossroads of history, home to great empires, conquerors, and civilizations. But what about the Persian people themselves? How has their DNA remained so distinct despite centuries of migration and invasion? The answer lies in the remarkable endurance of Persia's genetic identity. Unlike many ancient civilizations that saw their populations completely replaced by newcomers, Persians maintained a striking level of genetic continuity. Studies of ancient DNA reveal that modern Iranians share strong genetic links with their ancestors from the Neolithic and Bronze Age, meaning that even after the rise and fall of empires, the core Persian lineage has remained largely intact. However, genetic continuity does not mean isolation. Persian DNA carries subtle markers of historical interactions, evidence of the Silk Road's influence, the Indo-European migrations, and even contact with South and Central Asia. This balance between stability and selective absorption of foreign genetic traits is what makes Persian DNA so unique. Even the Arab, Mongol, and Turkic invasions, which reshaped many neighboring populations, left a relatively limited genetic imprint on the Persian gene pool. But it's not just about ancestry, it's about adaptation. The Iranian plateau, with its harsh deserts, towering mountains, and varied climates, has shaped the genetics of its people. Genetic adaptations related to altitude tolerance, metabolism, and immunity reveal how Persians have evolved to thrive in their environment. Even modern studies on Y chromosomal markers show fascinating patterns, connecting Persian populations across different regions while highlighting their distinctiveness from other Middle Eastern groups. Ultimately, Persian DNA is a living record of resilience. It tells a story not just of who the Persian people were, but of who they continue to be, a civilization that has absorbed history without losing itself to it.